Ever wonder what's darker than a horror movie? Buckle up. We're diving into medieval torture devices that make Saw look tame. These brutal tools broke bodies and minds, and you'll be glad you're in 2025 by the end. Stick around for the most shocking, bizarre methods from history, plus jaw-dropping stories. Comment below. What's the creepiest medieval fact you know? Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where we uncover history's wildest secrets. Today it's medieval torture. Cruel devices so grim, they'll haunt you. This isn't just gore, it's about twisted ingenuity, real people's suffering, and what it reveals about humanity. We're exploring 8 infamous methods packed with facts, surprises, and chilling tales. Grab a snack, nothing heavy, and let's jump into the dark side of history. 1. The Rat Dungeon. Picture this. It's the 1300s, and you're tossed into a pitch-black cell in the Tower of London, chained to a slimy wall. The air's thick with the stench of sewage, and as the tide rolls in, you hear it. Squeak, squeak. Rats. Hundreds of them, swimming in with the filthy water, their claws scratching the stone. As the water recedes, they're stranded with you, and they're hungry. At first, they nibble your toes. Then, they start tearing into your flesh, chunk by chunk, while you scream into the void. Welcome to the Dungeon of Rats, a torture so vile it could break even the bravest souls. This wasn't just about pain, it was psychological terror. The fear of rats, called musophobia, is real for a reason, and medieval torturers knew it. They'd let the rats do the dirty work, sometimes for days, until the prisoner confessed or lost their mind. One story from 1377 tells of a priest accused of treason who was left in the dungeon for 3 days. When guards finally checked on him, he was barely alive, his legs shredded, muttering about demons with red eyes. Can you imagine the panic? Would you rather face a swarm of rats or a horror movie jump scare? What's scarier to you? 2. The Heretic's Fork. Now let's talk about a device that sounds like it was cooked up by a supervillain, the Heretic's Fork. This was a metal rod with 2 sharp prongs at each end strapped around a prisoner's neck. One end dug into the soft flesh under your chin, the other pressed against your chest. If your head so much as twitched, those prongs stabbed deeper. You couldn't swallow, couldn't sleep, couldn't even cry without agony. Used by the Catholic Inquisition to silence heretics, this fork was all about control. You'd be forced to stand or hang from the ceiling, head tilted back, staring at the sky for hours. Sleep? Forget it. The moment you dozed off, your head would sag and a stab, instant wake-up call. In 1231, a woman named Marie of Toulouse was tortured this way for denying church doctrine. After 48 hours she recanted, but her neck was so scarred she could barely speak. Here's a wild fact. Some forks were engraved with Latin phrases like veritas, truth, as if torturing someone made you righteous. How messed up is that? What do you think? Could you stay awake under that kind of pressure? Drop your thoughts in the comments. 3. The Spanish Horse. Okay, this one's rough. The Spanish horse, also called the wooden donkey, was a triangular wooden frame, sharp edge up like a giant sawhorse. The prisoner was forced to ride it, their full body weight pressing their crotch against the point. Hours of this could crush bones, tear muscles, and cause unbearable pain. Sometimes, torturers added weights to the victim's legs or tickled their feet to make them squirm, worsening the agony. This was a favorite of the Spanish Inquisition, used to punish everyone from thieves to witches. In 1492, a merchant named Diego Lopez was tortured this way for smuggling. He lasted 6 hours before confessing, but the damage was so severe, he never walked again. The worst part? Some versions had fake horse heads and tails, like a sick joke. Imagine the humiliation. This makes modern tough love punishments, like standing in the corner, look like a spa day. What's the worst punishment you've ever faced? Share it below. I'm curious. The Pear of Anguish. Silent screams. The Pear of Anguish is straight out of a nightmare. Shaped like a metal pear with petals that opened when a screw was turned, this device was inserted into a victim's mouth, throat, or other places, depending on the crime. Turn the screw, and the petals expanded, ripping tissue and causing massive internal damage. It was rarely fatal right away. Infection usually finished the job. This was used across Europe, especially in Italy, to punish liars or sodomites. A 1560 record from Venice describes a man tortured with the pear for blasphemy. His screams were so loud, guards had to gag him around the device. Fun fact, some pears were ornately decorated, like they were art pieces. Imagine crafting something so evil with pride. If you were a medieval torturer, would you feel guilty using something like this? Be honest, comment below. 5. The saw, a gruesome end. Here's where things get really dark. The saw was exactly what it sounds like. A massive two-man saw used to cut people in half, usually starting at the groin while they were hung upside down. The upside down part wasn't just for show. It kept blood flowing to the brain, so the victim stayed conscious longer. This was a public spectacle, often used for crimes like witchcraft or treason. In 1463, during the Ottoman siege of Milan, 400 knights were sawed in half after surrendering, despite promises of mercy. The commander, Mahmud Pasha, claimed he'd only spared their heads. Talk about a loophole. Crowds would gather to watch, some cheering, others fainting. It was like medieval reality TV, but with higher stakes. Today, we binge true crime shows for shock value. Back then, this was their entertainment. What's the goriest show you've ever watched? Let me know in the comments. 6. The water cure. Ever heard of water intoxication? Medieval torturers turned it into an art form. The water cure involved forcing victims to drink gallons of water, sometimes up to 16 liters, through a funnel jammed down their throat. Too much water messes with your electrolytes, causing brain swelling, seizures, or even a burst stomach. Sometimes they'd mix in urine or bile for extra cruelty. In 1462, French poet François Villon faced this torture for theft. He survived, but was so broken, he vanished from history after his release. This method was a precursor to modern waterboarding, used by the CIA until recently. Crazy how torture evolves, right? What's your take? Are some punishments just too cruel, no matter the crime? Comment below. 7. The intestinal crank. This one's not for the faint of heart. The intestinal crank was a death sentence disguised as torture. A torturer would cut open a prisoner's abdomen, hook their small intestine to a crank, and slowly wind it out, up to 18 feet of it, while the victim watched. Death came from blood loss or shock, but the process could take hours. There's a chilling account from 1450 Hungary, where a rebel leader was executed this way in front of his followers. His screams echoed for an hour before he finally passed. The crank was turned slowly on purpose, like a twisted performance. Could you stomach watching something like this, even in a movie? Tell me in the comments. 8. The brazen bull, roasted alive. Let's end with the most theatrical torture device, the brazen bull. Invented in ancient Greece, but used in the Middle Ages, this was a hollow bronze bull big enough to fit a person inside. The victim was locked in, and a fire was lit underneath, roasting them alive. The bull's head had pipes that turned screams into eerie moos, entertaining the crowd. In 560 BC, the tyrant Phalaris of Sicily reportedly tested the bull on its own inventor, Perillaius. Talk about irony. By the Middle Ages, this was used sparingly, but always drew a crowd. It was like a medieval horror show, complete with special effects. What do you think? Does this beat modern haunted houses for creep factor? Drop your thoughts below. 9. The Judas Cradle. Imagine being forced to sit on a pyramid-shaped wooden seat, the sharp point aimed directly at your... well, you get the idea. The Judas Cradle was a torture device used in medieval Europe, particularly during the Spanish Inquisition. Victims were hoisted above the cradle and slowly lowered, their body weight causing excruciating pain as the point pierced their groin or anus. Torturers could prolong the agony by adjusting ropes or adding weights, ensuring hours of torment. In 1478, a suspected heretic in Seville endured this for 2 days before confessing. The psychological humiliation was as brutal as the physical pain. Could you imagine the fear of even seeing this device? What's the most intimidating thing you've ever faced? Comment below. The rack. Stretching to the breaking point. The rack was a notorious medieval torture device, a wooden frame with ropes or chains binding a victim's wrists and ankles. Widely used in England and France, it was a go-to for extracting confessions. Torturers turned a wheel to pull the ropes, stretching the body until joints dislocated, muscles ripped, or bones snapped. A 1533 London record details a thief stretched until his shoulders popped, his screams begging for mercy. The rack's slow, deliberate pace amplified its horror as victims felt every agonizing inch of their body being torn apart. This methodical cruelty made it both physically and psychologically devastating, breaking even the strongest wills. The rack wasn't just about pain. It was a calculated tool of control, forcing compliance through sheer terror. Its legacy as a medieval classic underscores the era's brutal approach to justice. Would you crack under the rack's relentless pressure? How long could you endure such torment? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's dive into this chilling piece of history together. 11. The Iron Maiden. The Iron Maiden was a terrifying medieval torture device, a coffin-like cabinet lined with sharp spikes, popular in Germany during the late Middle Ages. Victims were forced inside, and as the door closed, the spikes pierced their body, not deeply enough to kill instantly, but sufficient to inflict agonizing wounds. Often used as a psychological weapon rather than a death machine, the mere threat of the maiden could shatter a person's resolve. A 1515 Nuremberg chronicle describes a noblewoman confined in one for hours to coerce a political alliance, her fear of the spikes breaking her will. The suspense of awaiting the door's closure was as torturous as the pain itself, exploiting dread to control victims. This device embodied medieval cruelty, blending physical torment with mental anguish to enforce compliance. The Iron Maiden's grim legacy highlights the era's ruthless approach to power. What's scarier, the searing pain of the spikes or the unbearable suspense of waiting for the door to shut? Could you endure the psychological terror? Share your take in the comments, and let's explore this haunting piece of history together. 12. The wheel, breaking every bone. The breaking wheel was a barbaric medieval execution method that served as torture, widely used in France and the Holy Roman Empire for crimes like murder or rebellion. Victims were strapped to a large wooden wheel, where torturers wielded iron bars to methodically smash their limbs, shattering bones one by one. The mangled body was then hoisted on the wheel, often left to die slowly in public as a gruesome display. In 1340, a German bandit endured hours of this agony, his screams attracting crowds who gawked at the spectacle. The public nature of this punishment made it a powerful tool for instilling fear and asserting control, turning suffering into a community event. The breaking wheel wasn't just about physical pain. It was a stark warning to others, showcasing the consequences of defiance. Its brutality lingers as a chilling symbol of medieval justice. Could you stomach witnessing such a horrific scene in person? How would you react to this level of cruelty? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's dive into this dark piece of history together. 13. The thumbscrew. The thumbscrew, though small, was a ruthless medieval torture tool used across Europe. This compact device clamped onto a victim's fingers or toes, tightening until bones shattered and flesh tore, delivering intense, targeted pain. Its portability made it a favorite for interrogators seeking quick confessions. A 1420 French trial record recounts a suspected witch whose fingers were crushed until she broke, confessing under unbearable agony. The thumbscrew's simplicity was its strength. Easy to use, yet the pain lingered for weeks, leaving victims debilitated. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of slamming your finger in a door, but deliberately cruel and prolonged. Torturers wielded it to exploit the body's sensitive extremities, turning a minor-seeming tool into a nightmare. The psychological toll was just as brutal, as victims dreaded each turn of the screw. This device shows how even small instruments could enforce terror and control in the Middle Ages. What's the worst small injury you've endured? And how does it compare to this horror? Could you withstand the thumbscrew's grip? Drop your story in the comments, and let's discuss this chilling piece of history. 14. The Breast Ripper. The breast ripper was a ghastly medieval torture device aimed at women accused of adultery or witchcraft. This claw-like tool, with its sharp prongs, was used either cold or heated red-hot to rip into a victim's flesh, causing excruciating pain and permanent mutilation. Often performed publicly, it was designed to humiliate as much as to harm, amplifying the victim's suffering. In 1599, a Bavarian woman endured this brutal punishment for immorality, left scarred physically and emotionally for life. The device's gendered focus reveals the deep misogyny of the era, where women were disproportionately targeted for perceived moral failings. Justice in medieval times often meant cruel spectacle, prioritizing control over fairness. The breast ripper wasn't just about pain, it was a tool of societal oppression, stripping women of dignity in front of jeering crowds. Its legacy is a chilling reminder of how punishment was wielded to enforce rigid norms. How does this twisted sense of justice make you feel? Could you imagine facing such a fate for a minor accusation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's unpack this dark chapter of history together. 15. The Scavenger's Daughter. The Scavenger's Daughter, a sinister 16th century English torture device, was the brutal counterpart to the rack. Unlike the rack's stretching mechanism, this device forced victims into a cramped fetal position, their bodies clamped tightly within a metal frame. The compression caused unbearable pain, restricted breathing, and often led to internal bleeding. A 1546 account from the Tower of London describes a prisoner who fainted after enduring just 30 minutes, their body unable to withstand the crushing pressure. Its compact design made it a dungeon favorite, perfect for confined spaces, and the slow, suffocating agony it inflicted heightened the psychological terror. Torturers reveled in its efficiency, as victims gasped for air while their bones and organs were squeezed mercilessly. The device's name, ironically linked to its inventor, belied its cruelty, turning the human body into a helpless knot of suffering. Imagine the dread of being locked in such a contraption, every movement worsening the torment. This medieval horror shows the lengths people went to enforce control. Would you rather face the rack's stretch or the Scavenger's Daughter's crush? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's discuss. So, why are we so fascinated by this stuff? It's not just the gore. It's the stories of human survival, cruelty, and the thin line between justice and madness. These torture devices weren't just tools. They were symbols of power, fear, and control. But here's the kicker. We're not that different today. We might not use brazen bulls, but we've got our own ways of punishing. Cyberbullying, cancel culture, or even psychological tactics in workplaces. The tools have changed, but the urge to dominate hasn't. Take a second to think. What's the modern equivalent of a medieval torture device? Maybe it's the pressure to be perfect online, or the stress of keeping up in a world that never slows down. I'd love to hear your take. What's the toughest torture you face in 2025? Comment below and let's start a convo. If you made it this far, you're a legend. Did this video creep you out, blow your mind, or maybe both? Hit that like button if you're grateful these tortures are history, and subscribe for more dives into the wildest parts of the past. Ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. It's gonna be a banger. Oh, and share this with a friend who loves true crime or history. They'll thank you, or maybe curse you. What was the most shocking torture in this video? Drop it in the comments and let's keep the discussion going. See you in the next one.